Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune. Joining me once again is Shea Dixon on a Monday, October 26th, a couple days removed from LSU's loss to Texas A&M.
The dust has settled.
The dust has settled. We can have a rational conversation about this, and we can talk about everything in depth. And we can also talk about LSU's outlook for the playoff, LSU's outlook for the SEC title, LSU's outlook against Alabama, all that stuff coming up. But Shea, how are you doing?
It's crazy. I was writing this piece for Monday on the Bengal Tiger, and we've obviously, Julie, Jarrett, Matthew, have all shared their takes on the game and thoughts on the board. And everyone is sort of like I said, the dust is settled. So everyone's kind of wondering what's next. And we'll talk about a lot of that on this podcast, Maddie B. But it was strange to write a title, and which I still had not settled on, but like what's next after the collapse for a one-loss LSU team. Like the SEC race is what matters right now. LSU heads into November, a bye week this week, heads into November with one loss. And in conference, only four teams, four teams can say, five teams, something like that, LSU, and then you're into the gap, the group of A&M, the only unbeaten in the SEC with the win over LSU. And then you've got Georgia, Texas, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So Bama already caught two losses, Ole Miss, Missouri, teams that we thought were going to be in the thick of it are already sitting on the two losses. So we're in this weird. We didn't expect the team to be in this spot, and when they got to the spot, they blew it. But did they really blow it because they only have one SEC loss? Like the margin for error with losses is none now.
Yeah.
But you're not out of it, which we'll talk about obviously on the pod.
Exactly. We'll talk about all that. In terms of the A&M game, a 38-23 loss for LSU, a game of two halves, but at the same time, I think the first half contributed to the loss just as much as the second half. Weirdly enough, even though they dominated the game, like on paper for the first 30 minutes, they go to half only up 17-7. I mean, I wrote about it a ton after the game in that they had it was like 7.5 yards per play against to 4.8. They were just dominating the game in the first half, but ultimately botched field goal attempts, inability to finish drives, allowed A&M to stay in the game consistently, and they had 4 drops at receiver as well. So overall, the first half, you take a 10-point lead, but at the same time, it didn't feel the game did not feel finished by any means in a way that it should have been, in my opinion. It should have been at least 23-7, something like that.
It could have been more. They dominated Connor Wegman to a degree that we knew would be possible.
Exactly what we expected, like from the defense against Connor Wegman.
And they never let him get free. We talked about that on the pod too, that he has some legs. He can scramble for 40, 50 a game. He looked like a statue. He was shook. And I said it on Texas Radio. We said it on here. It would be a more difficult task to face a Marcel Reed because at least he's going to run around. If they're both 60% completion guys, play the guy who can actually run. A&M goes with Wegman for 2.5 quarters. And when they finally bail on him, it's short field after short field after short field. And let's be real, it wasn't just Reed. They couldn't stop the run game. LSU just could not stop the run game. So it's a weird thing to think, and I don't know if LSU fans felt this in real time. I just have seen this team enough, and I knew that when Reed came into that game, I said, this is over. This is going to, and this was after one nuss pick or whatever. When you get to the third one, it's, you're going to get steamrolled now. And all of it was when Reed came into the game, 8 minutes left, Maddie B, in the third quarter, LSU had 17 points in a game that they had completely dominated. And we are talking field goals, missed snaps on field goals, and not even just the missed field goals, not driving down there and getting scores, having to settle for the field goals. When you talk about games where you're like that, they deserve to lose, that is to me one of those they deserve to lose games, one of the most that I've seen in years. And when you get blown out 60-0, it's like, yeah, they deserve to lose. LSU had this game, they were in control of it. And they didn't take advantage. And then when A&M got a spark, LSU completely melts. LSU deserved to lose when you have that type of effort.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to have 283 yards in the first half, I'm just looking at it now. It's jarring how dominant they were. I mean, I thought Nuss played a great first half. We'll talk about the offense, I think, in a second. I think to build off your defense point, A&M scored 31 points. Once Marcel came into the game, 5
Yeah,
drives, 31 points.
23
And
minutes of game clock, 15 minutes of the fourth, and
and he threw
8 of the other.
and he threw 2 passes on 5 drives. Just
Completed them both.
dominated. Just, yeah, completed them both. One of them was a seam streak right up on a cover 3, which was good. But against LSU safeties, I think struggled quite a bit. It was clear, what do we take out of them not preparing at all for Marcel Reed? Because that's what it was. That's what it looked like. It was a defense that wasn't prepared for Marcel Reed. And I understand both sides of it. It's hard to prepare for 2 quarterbacks. It's hard to, you game plan for Connor Wegman. You're like, okay, Marcel Reed's a completely different player. That takes a lot of time and prep. How do you do that? At the same time, going into this game, you and I think a ton of people thought, hey, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw Marcel Reed. Like, I think that's a very real possibility. And there's
And
game tape of him. That's the thing, is that you're not
I
just
don't I
sitting
don't
there
think
lying.
that I'm with you there, and I get, look, you're referencing Greg Penn saying that they did not kind of plan for Marcel Reed. They
Yeah.
played Marcel Reed types this year.
Yeah.
Like they're even when they're over there on the sideline, which they're not for long, being able to be coached up because they're turning the ball over in 2 plays or whatever it is. But that you just got to make stops. They were getting pushed around at that point too on the O
Yeah.
line. Tight ends are blowing linebackers up. I think A&M caught a spark, got more physical with LSU, and put them away. And look, in the post-game press conference, Brian Kelly said, Brian Kelly's right about this. Nussmeier shouldn't be in this position. Nussmeier had 3 picks. He said, I'm not going to come out here and just bash Nussmeier because he should not be in this position, because we were in a game, LSU was in a game, as Brian Kelly said, we were in total control of, and we had 17 points. And Brian Kelly quickly points to, we finished the game with 24 rushing yards, 23 of them. Let's see, Josh Williams, 23, Durham, 11 for 15.
That was, yeah.
Nuss gets -3. You're settling in what, around and then as a team -11, which was the bad snap.
Even if you take away the sacks, I believe it's only 1.9 yards per carry.
It's absolutely awful. And you had been on this upward tick of, we've run the ball for 100 yards plus against Ole Miss. Now Caden Durham's run the ball by himself for 100 plus against Arkansas. And then A&M just completely shuts you down to the point where you can do nothing but pass it. And Nussmeier already looked in a funk.
Mm-hmm.
And while Brian Kelly's right, you cannot win without running the football. And we don't even have to save that discussion. I don't know if it's probably a myriad of these things. And to me, it really doesn't matter because they're the ones who have to fix it. But in terms of blame, you can blame the O-line coach. You can blame the 5 starters. You can blame the running backs. You can blame the running backs coach. You can blame the OC, the scheme. It doesn't matter because they just figure it out. They don't run the football well. And at times they do, at times they don't. And it looks very simplified to the point of, okay, this isn't working and it's very obvious and you can't pass the ball either. And now it's stagnant. And that's what it just felt stagnant in the first half and into the third, but it didn't feel like danger warning, like, because Connor Wegman wasn't doing anything.
Exactly.
So it was like, all right, whatever. Like, they'll need to score eventually. They'll score eventually. And it blew up in their face. And I'll say this. Okay. Yes. You don't want to solely blame Nussmeier. Nussmeier shares blame in this game. And when you look at Matty B, a drive chart, and I just always like to step back, look at drive charts. There were a million drives in this game.
A lot. Yeah.
And I'll run you right down all the way until the moment Marcel Reed, the quarterback for A&M, steps into the game. To this point, Connor Wegman had 5 completions in the game. LSU's defense had forced A&M into a punt, a fumble, a touchdown, the one long Le'Veon Moss drive, answered punt, answered turnover on downs, answers coming out of halftime. Immediately, A&M gets the ball first, punt, like 5 plays, 9 yards. Next drive, well, surely, they're coming out, they're scripted again. Second half, they're going to get something. 3 plays, 5 yards, punt. Nussmeier throws a pick. They put Reed in, touchdown. From there, LSU goes interception, turnover on downs, interception,
Or yeah,
the
from there
kickoff,
it goes downs, downs,
yeah,
interception, touchdown, interception.
score, interception, and then the end of the game. Let me give you what happens with that. Interception, touchdown for A&M. Turnover on downs, touchdown for A&M. Interception again, touchdown for A&M. Now we're into the fourth quarter, and LSU's already losing. Then you go down, you score. All right. Well, A&M answers with a touchdown. Then you get picked off again. A&M kicks a field goal. Then you turn it over on downs. The game's over. The picks led to short fields. It led to immediate touchdowns. Like, that was a bad showing for
Yes,
someone whose first half was like, oh, he just threw for 250 and 2. And then
lights
you look
out.
up and you're like, he threw for like 30 yards and 3 picks the rest of the game.
Lights out first half, like lights out. And I mentioned the 4 drops. I think a few of those could have resulted in either touchdowns or easier field goals. And then also the one to Kyron Lacey on the sideline right before half would have got them inside the 30 with like 50 seconds left. Like then once they don't catch that, they run out the clock and end up going to halftime. Like there are multiple opportunities here for him to have had a bigger half and for this offense to, like I said before, at the very least put up 23 points in the first half. Like that's the floor. They probably could have been at 27, 28. So for a first half to go that well and then a second half to crumble in that way, I give A&M a lot of credit. I think Mike Elko,
Yeah, we've made it more than 10 minutes in. We need to give A&M some credit here. They did step up and win this game.
A&M's defense we knew was going to be good. I think they started to really, really pressure Nussmeier because of the inability to run the ball. And once Nussmeier starts to feel pressure, people have talked about, he does have the tendency to retreat really quickly and to try to make those throws. And in a
He's
game,
gotten away with it a lot of times this year, though.
yes, he's gotten away with it a ton. In this game, where Garrett Nussmeier, if you go into Garrett Nussmeier's head, he's like, as an offense, we have struggled to catch the ball. As a special teams, we've struggled to kick the ball. And ultimately, the protection has not been great. So now it's like, I have to make this throw here in this spot. I have to make this throw perfect here. Even if it's not completely open, I have to throw this ball because we don't have a run game. We don't have a way to move the ball towards the end zone. And so then he starts pressing and he starts making just horrible decisions. Like this is the side of Nussmeier people are worried about. And I think it's a very valid argument. I think that it all ties together in the fact that this offense was just broken in the second half. And he was a result of that. He is the one that I think tried pressing too hard at the end of the day to try to save this offense. And, that's the result. So, people can say, I agree in that Nussmeier has a hand in this, especially that first interception. You cannot make that first interception. That's the one to me that is the
I
backbreaker.
mean, the player on A&M's team, forgive me for not knowing his name off the top of my head. Did you see the interview? He had 2 picks,
Yeah.
and he said on both of them, he was like, Garrett saw me standing right there. I didn't think he was going to throw it, and he did. And on the second one, he definitely saw me standing there and threw it right into my chest.
Yeah. So the first one, again, my problem was you're throwing a jump ball to like Aaron Anderson right there. You can't
Then
do
they
that.
had done that twice already
Yeah,
before.
you can't do that. So again, that one, Marcel Reed comes in, direct touchdown. The one thing I will say, and why I'm not even sure, I don't know how to phrase this. Like the third interception to me it wasn't good, but yeah, I think the game was already decided there. When LSU went down and scored a touchdown to cut it to 23-28, we're like, okay, this game is not over. And A&M responds going 4 plays, 75 yards in a minute 48. In my head, I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter at this point. They can't stop them at all. So now it's They can't score the ball. Nussmeier is throwing terrible interceptions. He's playing terrible, and the defense cannot stop this offense. So now it just compounds into a full meltdown of LSU getting stomped 31-6 in the second half by Texas A&M. And yeah, I go back to a lot of things, but I think the first half in particular, I have not seen a half that dominant result in just a 17-7 game. A&M could not move the ball on almost every possession but one. There's one possession they moved the ball, and that was a touchdown. The rest of them, they had no pulse. The defense was fantastic. The offense was fantastic, and then they couldn't score touchdowns. And then they botched 3 field goals. So, or 2 field goals. No, yeah, 3 field goals, right? No, they
Uh,
field
yeah,
goal.
and the defense again, kudos to
Oh,
a defense
field
that has
goal.
continued to get better. As I said, they opened the game. This is what they've allowed. This is what they allowed on those drives: 20 yards, 11 yards. Matthew mentioned the 75-yard drive that results in a score in the first quarter. Le'Veon Moss did a lot of damage on that drive. They come back and they answer 9-play drive for 11 yards, punt, 3 and out, -1 yard, turnover on downs and only went 26 yards. Now you're into the second half, back-to-back punts, 5 plays for 9 yards, 3 plays for 5 yards. When Nuss throws that pick, they come in, it's at the 8-yard line, and Reed runs it right in. Then comes the onslaught of 70 for 60, short field again, 5 for 26, short field again, or not short field, 4 for 75 on the long deep ball that they threw right after LSU's touchdown.
Yeah.
Then they go down and score again. And then 6 for 29 at the end of the game. A&M's kind of salting it away, and they kick the field goal. So they were in control until it was, all right, now it's a short field. Now all of a sudden we're on our heels and we're having to react to a quarterback that is not the one we were planning for.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this offense, I think once again it was painfully obvious CJ Daniels was not on the field. I think it became painfully obvious that Garrett Dellinger left the game early on. So now you're down 2 starters, and you pair
And
that
how
with
many times have we said that about Daniels? That it is very obvious when he's, and we don't even mean his production. It's just everything that comes with him being on the field.
yeah, and he even had a heck of a catch early on. I think what do you have 2 catches for the game? I don't have it in front of me. CJ Daniels, yeah, 2 for 17.
Yeah, I've got it if you didn't.
Yeah, he's and then Chris Hilton comes back, but he clearly is on a pitch count. Like he's not going to play 60 snaps in this game. So Hilton had his 2 catches, which was great to see. Shout out to Chris Hilton. But it was a lot of Xavier Thomas. They threw him on a go route a couple times where we weren't comfortable, and so it's just things started to compound. That's the point. Is that everything compounded, and I still think the most glaring problem for this offense is the run game. Like I just think that is going to be the question moving forward: is can they run the ball? And we'll get into this in the back half moving forward. But I do feel this was the stretch of the best defenses that they're going to play this year. So that's what I'll leave this conversation with, and we can move into the back half unless you have anything else on this game.
Well, I think this will set the back half up well here. I'm going to ask you to rank these things.
Is that what you've
And
been writing? The best?
yes, as we've gone, I've thought out loud or in my head, excuse me, of what we've talked about issues being. And this team, look, this team has some pop. The defense has gotten better. They have 1 loss going in SEC play going into November with 4 games left in an SEC that's in shambles kind of all over, and who knows what November holds. So this is not an all, woe is me moment. This is a team that's over under was set at 9 wins.
9.5, yeah.
That was the goal. So let's see if they can get there. Obviously the goal is to get beyond that and make the playoffs, but that was what people expected. And when this season started, Matty B, I don't think that many people thought they would even have been in this spot. What stings is they could have put that game away, and they didn't. And it hasn't been like that's been a massive theme this year. They've trailed in so many games.
Right.
They're the ones that had to come back. Like that's probably how Ole Miss feels. Is like, wait,
Exactly.
did we just lose a game that we dominated from start to finish and we went to overtime in?
Well, that's what we talked about again, like you said, it felt like the inverse of the Ole Miss game for especially like later in the first half. You're like, okay, they're not putting this game away. Why are they not putting this game away? You know, you botched the field goal attempt. Like it felt like that, and it reminds you how hard it is to win on the road in the SEC because on paper, and I still think if this game was played in a neutral site, I'm taking LSU 10 times out of 10. Like I think LSU is the better team on a neutral site in this game, but
Kudos to A&M though. A&M won that game.
A&M has enough talent, clearly, but with Kyle Field, with 100,000 people there, like you're hyped up. I think LSU still had some of those procedural penalties. Like this is winning back-to-back games on the road against Arkansas and A&M was an incredibly tall task. I just thought they'd slip up against Arkansas. They didn't. They beat
We
Arkansas.
said the most likely thing was they would split them.
Yes, and we said going into this 3-game stretch, Ole Miss, Arkansas, A&M,
2 and
2-1.
3. Or 2
yeah,
and 1.
2 out of 3, 2-1, yes. And they did that. So we can talk about the rest of the schedule moving ahead, but it is
So we're
important.
going to play this game, and then we'll catch an ad break, and then that will set us up for these final 4 games. We'll talk a little playoffs. We'll talk a little what's possible. Of these 5 things that you would consider worrisome, rank them in order of most worrisome moving forward. You've got 4 games left. Okay. See if we can see these. Nuss's 3 picks in the game.
Let me just make you full screen.
All right. If you're watching on YouTube, you can read these too.
Wrong one.
Nobody wants to see you.
Wrong one. There we
go. All right. Rank these as in importance moving forward of most worrisome to least worrisome. That Nuss threw 3 picks, and you can toss in how they came, when they came, all of that. That LSU couldn't stop the run, 250 plus. A&M could have gone for much more had those not been short fields at the end, in my opinion. That LSU only ran for 24 yards. That LSU couldn't stop a running quarterback in Reed. Or that LSU only scored 17 points on the first 7 possessions of the game.
Okay. Most concerning is still, like I said, going to be the rushing attack on offense. So
the LSU running for only 24 yards. That's been something that's happened before. I agree. I think that is number 1 on the list because it brings no balance to the offense.
Yeah, there's no balance there. And it affects just everything. So yeah, that's number 1. Number 2, I do think the run defense is still a concern. So that it kind of goes both ways there. I think there's arguments for number 2, but I'm gonna go with that because I do think that was kind of jarring. And even though Arkansas didn't run the ball a ton, even though Ole Miss was good, not great, I still think that's kind of a concern of mine moving forward.
Okay, so we're going trenches here. We're going that LSU 1, they can't run the ball, at least not consistently.
Yeah.
2, that they've shown now a capacity to really give up yards in a major way, much like, gosh, it's flashbacking to Nichols in games like that.
Yeah. I think most people here would put Nuss 3, which I'd be fine with. But at the same time, the inability to finish drives, this goes back to what we talked about early in the season. And we talked about this the entire year. The lack of, one play touchdown type stuff or explosive playability, they have to continuously sustain drives and they can't. And part of that is because they can't run the ball, but part of that is because they have a offense that is predicated, I think, on being efficient and completing 7, 8, 9-yard passes, trying to, move the chains and move the chains and move the chains, and they can't. And they struggle to finish drives as a result. We've seen it. We saw it against USC, first game of the year. That's why they lost, because they couldn't finish drives. They got stuffed at the 1. They kicked a bunch of field goals. And now it's still the problem. It's the same exact problem. So, yeah, I think finishing drives is a massive concern for me still, which is tied into everything. It's tied into Nuss. It's tied into the run game. It's tied into the offensive line. So, yeah, that's 3 for me.
It's as you see if you're watching on YouTube, I've written it down. We've got the number 1 most worrisome, LSU can't run the football consistently. Number 2, that they gave up a bunch of yards rushing again. And number 3, that 17 points in the first 7 possessions. There's a caveat. I've got that at number 1.
Yeah.
That's just such a concern for me this year.
Yeah.
They go down and settle they can get into the red zone, even with no run game. They find ways to get down there. They just don't finish. And when it compounds like that, like at Arkansas, they only had like 5 penalties in this game. At Arkansas, they had double-digit penalties, and Ramos kicks 4 field goals, and it's one of those things where it's like, man, a game like that, normally you're not winning. How'd you blow them out? Well, this is what happens when the inverse happens and you start turning it over. And
I mean, sorry to cut you off. In
I
13
just
games,
think that we've seen that too much. We've seen way too much of they just don't finish dry. Like they're so clean on offense and crisp, and you're like, oh man, they can move it even when they can't run it. Oh, and here comes Durham. Boy, they look great. And you look up and they have 17 points.
in the last 2 years, Damian Ramos was 10 of 14 in 2022 on field goals, 12 of 15 on field goals last year. This year, he's already attempted 17. That does not include the botched snap. So make it 18. They've attempted 18 field goals in 8 games. That's just that's two and a half or 2.25 per game. That's just too much. Like they're not finishing drives well. Sorry. What's next?
You said that most people would say the Nuss interceptions would be in the top 3. I'll put that at 4.
Yeah.
I say didn't stop a running quarterback at 5 because he wasn't the starter. It was Reed. They were short fields, all that. And we've also seen them stop running
Yeah.
quarterbacks to a degree
Sellers,
already,
Green.
but it will play into what we talk about moving forward because they're about to play teams that do have running quarterbacks.
Yes. Yeah.
But Nuss 3 INTs. How concerning is that for you? Because we went from great Nuss to, hey, here's bad Nuss, but he doesn't always play like that, to like that was complete meltdown.
I think this offense becoming one dimensional is a major concern. And whenever this offense is one dimensional, Nussmeier is not Jaden Daniels. He cannot save you. He can't bail you out. He's not a number 1 overall pick in terms of it being like what Jaden Daniels is and was. He's limited. He can throw the ball very well. He has a good arm. He has a great arm, but he doesn't run well. You're able to scheme, or you're able to scheme up like as a defense. I feel like a defense for Nussmeier when LSU cannot run the ball and really make him uncomfortable. So,
and you said that after the South Carolina, what game was it? Ole Miss, South
which
Carolina, Ole
one?
Miss game. You said I think teams have started to play Nussmeier differently.
I mean that goes in conjunction with the run game limitation. So it's basically like if I'm playing the defense, if I am coordinating defense, which I'm not a coach, but I'm saying LSU is going to have to prove to me, especially if I have a front like A&M and Ole Miss, you're gonna have to prove to me you can run the ball on me. You're gonna have to prove to me that Nussmeier is going to take off. Like if not, we're just gonna play man and just turn our backs to him because we know he's not gonna run. Like there's a lot of things that Nussmeier does that you can scheme against. And then when you take away some of those shorter throws, he's going to be antsy and take some shots deep that are going to cost him. So he trusts his arms a little bit too much. The interceptions are a concern, but it's not my number 1 concern of this offense. It's not the number 1 concern of this team, because we've seen how good he can be when he's comfortable. And think about this, guys. When he's not comfortable, that's when the interceptions are coming. That's nothing new for a quarterback, but if this offense had any semblance of balance, I think we're talking about this offense as being the best offense in the country. They've been able to do this without being explosive, without having a consistent run game. And
That's
they're
why I
still
put number 1 the lack of scoring once you draw. I mean,
exactly.
somehow they still moved the ball. They were sitting in the top. Would you have an SP plus efficiency on? They're like up there, but they just don't score.
Exactly. So, again, it's all connected. It's all intertwined. If people want to say Nussmeier sucks, you can definitely say that, because 3 interception game is a 3 interception game. At the end of the day, that's not good. You can't have that. But it is all relative in terms of there's a lot that's going wrong with this offense, and we'll see if they can clean it up moving forward.
And yes, we'll bring this up on the back end. Everybody's got issues right now.
Oh, yours. I still think this is the top
Everybody.
12 team in the country. LSU is, personally.
So it's just it's game to game, which actually makes the season a lot of fun to watch across the board. All of our game week coverage, as y'all have noticed, is sponsored by LSUsnacks.com. You can go there, LSUsnacks.com, and check it out for yourself. But the reason that we've linked up with them is because they are the official at this point. Maddie B. Let me bring up my ad read here. The officially licensed snack through LSU Athletics. So they're working directly in correlation with LSU. And there's been a lot of talk from fans about, hey, how can I support NIL efforts in different ways? And it's not just giving, money. Well, here's a way. Every purchase of an LSU Win bar or the LSU Win cookies directly goes back and supports Tiger student athletes on campus. So if you go to www.lsusnacks.com, you'll see it. You'll be able to check out. I've had both now. They're great. But again, they worked a long time over the summer with LSU and a handful of other schools. And LSU jumped on board with this and said, hey, look, this is a way for us not to just have something cool out there for the fans, but also give back to the student athletes in this NIL era. So it's got all the official licensing on it, all of that. It tastes great, looks great. But again, each week we are presented by LSU Snacks, lsusnacks.com. And very soon here, they will be in grocery stores in different spots of South Louisiana. So check them out when you see it. It's hard to miss. It's got the Win bar on it. So the Win bites, the Win bar, whatever you're going for, it's delicious. I had a number of the bars already, Maddie B. So I'll give you some. They sent me a bunch.
Good.
For reading that, they sent me a bunch. Now go buy them. All right. We talked all that to talk this, Maddie B. 4 games left. Bye week this week. Bama as well.
Yeah.
Then it's a bye week. Then it's Bama. This has existed forever. Each Bama, both LSU and Bama getting a bye. But this is the less Saban era of like, here come the 2 top 5 teams. They are going to get 2 weeks off. All that. They need to just play this game on like Thursday night this week. Like, let's just play this game. Does not need 2 weeks of build up. If LSU fans think they're mad right now, go read a Bama board. Bama is working on a new coach, obviously with DeBoer and new staff. But Maddie B, I asked you to rank these things, and you put it number 1. The issues running the football and having the football run on you. So I'll offer you up this. In the SEC right now, after 8 games, Bama is averaging about 5 yards a carry. They lead the SEC in rushing touchdowns at 28, and they sit, you would call it middle of the pack, but it's all about the same when you're in there. So it is, I guess, middle of the pack, but 6th in the SEC. They rush it for about 178 yards a game, something in that range. For some perspective, Ole Miss rushes it for about 15 yards, about 10 yards more a game. And LSU has faced that Ole Miss team already. A&M rushes it for about 40 something more a game. And you saw what just happened. Now, this is a running quarterback, which is on this list, but they will be preparing for Milroe. They've played Milroe. Yeah. How does first off, that stat, how they do running the football, but also at the same time, their run defense is among the worst in the SEC. They're giving up nearly 150 a game. LSU, a team we're talking about getting run on, just got run all over, and the average only dipped to 130 a game. So,
yeah, Alabama
runs the ball well. They do not defend the run well.
I don't think Alabama does a lot of things well defensively. Like, I think
a lot of LSU fans would agree with that, right? A lot of Alabama fans would agree with that.
Yeah, they have significantly struggled this year, and that's why I said I think Oklahoma may be pending. I think LSU has faced 4 of the toughest defenses that it'll face all year. Like, this stretch of Alabama, Florida, Vanderbilt will be a breath of fresh air for this offense. I think going from what we saw from South Carolina and Ole Miss and Texas A&M, like, those are 3, in my opinion, 3 high-level defenses. Alabama has not been that this year. You go look at the Vanderbilt loss. You go look at really any game, even the Georgia one where they won the second half. I mean, they couldn't stop a nosebleed. Like, it's just been a consistent thing with them. I think their secondary is not nearly as good as it usually is. Their defensive line's good, but it's not great how we usually expect it to be. So I feel much better about LSU's offense just looking ahead at the rest of the schedule here that there will be some success compared to what they faced against A&M and Ole Miss and South Carolina.
Now, again, we're moving through this playoff discussion with 4 games left, which it's an expanded playoff. It's 12 games. Your conference champs, P4 is weird to say, but they all automatically get in, Matty B. Then what do you have? You get
So it's
the
4 highest rated champs and then 7 automatic or no, I'm sorry,
top
it's
12.
4 get buys, 1 more champion gets in, and then you'll have 7 automatic bids or 7
Which would come
at-large
from
bids.
whom the teams that are ranked in the top 12 in their standings at the end of the season, which have not been released yet. We've been working off AP and coaches, which LSU is currently 16 in both of those.
So Notre Dame, depending on where they go, they're 8th right now. Even if they go 11-1, they cannot get a bye. So they'll be one of those at-large spots.
So you've got 6 spots to work with.
So 6 spots there, and then
if LSU doesn't win the SEC, which is we're going into November, Matty B, and like people will laugh like, oh, they'll win the SEC. No, it's not likely they're winning out, but they're in a position with about 6 other SEC teams here where we don't know what's going to happen down this next 4 games.
I mean, I wrote this on a board in response to, like, they're going to be favored in these last 4 games. The Alabama game is
they won't be
clearly
favored against Bama.
Yes, they're point and a half favorite, I think.
Okay, all right, we'll see where
Slightly.
it settles.
Let's say they're close. Whatever, pick them 1 point favorite, same thing. But this is the game, right? This Alabama game will determine it, whether or not they make the playoffs. Because we've already said it going into the year. You're not making it 9-3. You're just not. That's why the USC.
Well, there's people out there that are buzzing. Let's see if it's chaos in a month. And I'm not speaking from LSU's purposes, but there will be a day where 3-loss team is in the playoffs.
I just struggle this year. Maybe
that's fine. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Seen the chaos through 2 months with a month left. Rivalry games, more ranked teams, more chaos, even unranked teams knocking off ranked teams. There's just people already starting to say, hey, get ready. If you're pitchforking it, there's going to come a time where a 3-loss team gets it.
Yes. I do think this Alabama LSU game is the de facto elimination game.
One of them's in, one of them's going to stay alive, and the other isn't.
Yeah, the upside for the winner here is huge, especially if it's LSU that wins here, because you'll go into the last 3 games of the season as, I presume, a touchdown favorite, like 6-point favorites at Florida, home Vanderbilt, home Oklahoma, somewhere in there. So again, people have asked me, I've said before, it's like they could run like I put it at like what 25%, 30% chance they end up winning these last 4 games. Is it likely? No, but is it possible? 100%. You got to get over the Alabama hurdle first and go from there. So that's why you go back to the USC loss. That's why I was so annoyed by it. That's why LSU fans were so frustrated by it, because it's like going 6-2 in the SEC is awesome. Going 6-2 in the SEC deserves applause. Like, you deserve to get credit for that. But you can't lose to USC, who now we know USC sucks. And it's like, well, now you really have no margin for error. You have to go 7-1 in the SEC in order to make the playoffs, in my opinion. Like, again, maybe they make it without it, but like 7-1 also would get them into the SEC championship game, most likely, right? Like, unless if A&M has a tiebreaker now over them. I don't know how it would work if Texas ended up also at 7-1 with a win over A&M. Like, you have that weird little scenario there. But regardless, and Georgia, haven't even mentioned Georgia. So, like, you have to win these last 4 games, in my opinion, to get into the playoffs, and that would also maybe get you to the SEC championship game, but I don't think you need it at that point. So, a lot to play for, and I think with this expanded playoff, it is serving the purpose of all these teams in the top 25 are still have something to play for, and I think that's great.
And again, we're 2/3 of the way through the season, so you've mixed in some non-con games for a lot of teams here, but it's to show you, I guess, the kind of how tight this is. Mississippi State is bottom at the SEC. There's 16 teams. Unfortunately for LSU, they don't play State for the first time ever this year.
Right.
They've given up 291 points this season in 8 games. No other team in the SEC has given up more than 200. In fact, LSU and Vandy at 182 are the next worst on this list. But there's a lot of teams into the 170s and into the 50s. The Bama, for instance, I mean, A&M 147. Only 3 teams have given up fewer than 100 points this year: Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. And LSU already beat Ole Miss. I look and we know what this defense is, right? Even when I say that they've given up the most 22 points a game, light years better than what it was a year ago. They'd be way behind Mississippi State a year ago.
Yeah.
So we've seen progress there. When you look at Florida, they're giving up 24 a game. When you look at playing a Bama team that, as you said, doesn't do a lot of things right, this is a bit skewed. They give up 19 a game, but they've shown the propensity to give up more than that. Again, it lost to
But
Vandy
heck,
is one that
they played Missouri this past week without Brady
crushed
Cook,
them.
and Missouri looked like it did not know how to play football. So
No, just crushed them. Then you play Oklahoma. They're giving up more than 20 points a game. And the other one being Vandy, who I said is tied with LSU. So
yeah,
you're not facing the juggernauts defensively here. And even more so, if you're ever going to get your run game going, which is insane as this sounds, but the Bama game is one you can actually maybe do it in.
100%. Like, this is, again, A&M and Ole Miss, like, in South Carolina's fronts. You're not facing those fronts anymore. Alabama might have like the star talent to compare to those guys, but they don't have that production. They don't have those NFL picks that A&M has, that
Well,
Ole
yeah,
Miss has, that South
it's
Carolina has.
State obviously is the worst, as I noted. They're the worst defense in the SEC. Bama is right behind State in yards allowed on the run, through the run game. So
I
do
mean,
they find their way?
Just the Vanderbilt game alone.
Yeah, but Vanderbilt's quarterback will also run the football.
Yeah, but still, like, on the offensive line, they were kind of pushing them around a little bit. Like, when they needed to close out that game, Vanderbilt legitimately just put their head down and just said, "We're going to get 3 yards on this run."
And this
4
isn't
yards.
a normal Bama. They're not a normal Bama team. And this is what we're speaking to, is to a larger point here is we knew LSU wasn't going to be a juggernaut this year. But I guess the frustrating part for sure for LSU fans comes, you should have won that game because you could have stayed alive in this chaos of, well, yes, LSU has a lot of flaws, but so did these other teams. So if you can somehow keep winning, now eventually, look, this is going to catch up to you. LSU should probably have a worse record than they have. That South Carolina comeback, I have no idea how it happened. They could have easily lost to Ole Miss. Like,
The fact that
there's a point
again,
where you're like, hey, be happy you're here.
fans,
But it's
fans
very tough to swallow when they give away a game like that one.
fans saying, "Hey, man, we're this this close to being 7-1 or this close to being 8-0. You're also this close to being 4-4." I think this is a 6-2 team. Like, if there ever was one right now, LSU is a 6-2 team. They've pulled out 2 games maybe they weren't supposed to. They've lost 2 games maybe they were supposed to win. Like, that's just football. And now they're 6-2.
They lose in week 1 in a neutral site in the final 8 seconds. They grabbed a couple SEC road wins, one in dominant fashion, one in how the hell did they come back fashion.
Yeah.
And they protected home court.
Yeah.
Like, that's a solid showing.
Exactly.
For
like
a team that we didn't expect a ton from.
For sure. So now it comes into the back half of the year. If we say everything's, this has been expected to this point through 8 games where we knew they'd be in dog fights, all this stuff. I think Alabama not being as good as it was supposed to be before the season, and Oklahoma also not being as good as it was before the season.
Oklahoma's 4-4 overall. For those that don't know, we'll kind of catch y'all up that aren't the junkies. Bama's 6-2. Obviously, they've had their couple of losses. Vandy being the one that everyone's going to talk about. Then you play Florida. Florida's now starting DJ Lagway at quarterback. They had already mixed him in, but Mertz, unfortunately.
And that is a dangerous game. I don't want to dismiss that game.
Playing at Florida is never playing on the road in the SEC is not easy.
And Florida just kicked the teeth in of Kentucky this past week. So we know that's not a gimme.
Very Jekyll and Hyde team, Florida right now. But yes, they're sitting at 4-3. They get back on a win streak with a game win there, as you noted, against Kentucky. But Bama 6-2, Florida 4-3, Vandy 5-3. It's obviously been the talk of the SEC, and then OU 4-4. And the only teams worse, Auburn, Kentucky, and State, don't come as a major shock. It is Oklahoma that everyone is a bit surprised. Is man, y'all came into the SEC and just looked beyond this past weekend where Jackson Arnold comes back in and Oklahoma puts it together. They have looked downright terrible.
Yeah, I'm terrible. I would argue this schedule gets progressively easier. Like Alabama's the toughest game. Then I think Florida on the road is the second
At
most
Florida,
challenging game.
correct.
And then Vanderbilt at home, third
You're
most tough.
you're 1,000%
So
correct. The
it's kind of
game
laddered a little bit.
It is. It's laddered. Well, then if you win, that's again. I'll agree with you again here that, of course, you say Bama is the most important. When you're in, if the goal is the playoffs or the SEC championship, or if the goal is to not lose again, well, the next game is always the most important game. But yes, Bama is the most important because it's next, but also because you're right. It's at home. It's against another team that's 6-2, and it can keep you alive. You just faced one of these games where one of you is going to lead the SEC, the other is going to be no room for error. Now you're in that. Can you win that game of no? This is the no room for error game where it's over for you playoff race wise if you lose it. And neither Bama's not living up to the Bama standard. LSU certainly isn't there either, and I don't think there was a realistic expectation preseason that they would be. But this game is a lot more intriguing than we thought it would be before the season. It is winnable for LSU if they play well, and if you can put out of your mind this past weekend's collapse, people viewed this Bama game as very winnable, before LSU went out and laid an egg in the second half and fell apart. So 2 weeks to prep for it. We'll see. That's the big one. We'll do predictions and all that on the season, how it could all go. But again, I'm going to maintain this, which is what I said before A&M. LSU can win every single game or lose every single game on the schedule. I don't think they're going to lose every game. We have not seen a Kelly team fall apart. But no. I do think that there is not you're not playing Georgia and you're not playing Texas. So there's not some gap here that you have to overcome, that you're so far behind that you need magic to happen. Like, you got through Ole Miss already. So let's see what happens here with Bama.
Yeah.
Trust me, Bama fans are no higher on their team than LSU fans are. So
yes. In short, LSU fans, if you're trying to come up with playoff scenarios, they're going to have to win out. Like, in my opinion.
And here's the other thing. They're at 6. Yeah, of course, you got to win out. Yeah. But they're at 16. They're not ranked. So, like, if you were sitting here like, oh, you got to win out, but you got to win out and you got to get in the top 12. If they're at 16, you win out and you're in the top 12. You're in the playoffs.
Heck, if they beat Bama, they're probably back in the top 12.
Now, these are the coaches in AP polls, and they're going to go off the college football poll. But I don't think that's going to deviate far from 60. If LSU showed up in that at 24, it would be insane.
Yeah, no. If they end in the year with wins over Ole Miss and wins over Alabama, I think that'll have more than enough weight to get them in. At 10-2, I was looking at it,
and then who knows who's going to Atlanta if you go undefeated?
Correct. I was looking at it.
Literally, you have no clue at this point.
No, that's what I was saying. Like Georgia, Texas, LSU, and A&M could all be 7-1. Like there's a world where that happens. I don't know, but
and if Bama wins this game, they stay alive as well, or not all be set. Yeah, they could all be 7-1 overall, but
well, Bama has 2.
Bama wins this game, they can stay alive and get into the playoffs. Obviously. With,
yes,
the pair of losses
for sure.
But yeah, SEC. A&M's the only team that remains unbeaten, and their schedule sets up favorably.
God, yes,
they play at South Carolina, which ain't easy, and they got to do that this weekend. So that's a tough turnaround. But then you get New Mexico State at home, so they did have a non-con late. A terrible Auburn team, but at Auburn. And then Texas, top 10 matchup, which obviously is not favorable, but it's going to be a great game and sets up well if A&M does not stumble. But who knows? I mean, how the season's gone, South Carolina could blow A&M out next week, and then we're
Yeah.
right back to this who's in, who's out thing.
Yeah. I was looking at the odds. LSU is plus 200 to make the playoffs right now, plus 270 to make the conference
Well, there's too
title
much
game.
chaos. They're not going to give anyone too much money plus money
No,
there
but
because
that's what I
nobody
was
knows
saying. I
what's going to
said,
happen.
heck, I just said like 30% chance of making, winning out, going 4-0 here, and yeah, plus 200 is about 33% roughly, right? If you bet, bet 10, win 20, something like that. So, anyways, it's going to be very interesting. That's the rundown of the
2
playoff
weeks, 2
scenarios.
weeks for both teams. So this is good. I think
Yes.
that you get to step back, you get to think about where things are, and then you get 4 more games. Which, hey, this is why we're here, Matty B. Football season, and as tough as that loss is to swallow, it's one that's easy to put behind you because they just gave it away, and it didn't come down to a point. They gave it away, and then they got blown out. Like, put
Yeah.
it away, move forward.
Yeah, still a very good team. Like I said, in my opinion, I think this is still one of the 12 best teams. But like I wrote in my recap, now there can't be these lapses. They can't go down 17-0 on the road. You can't go lose
No,
the second half 31. Like you can't have these lapses where you aren't a top 12 team, clearly. They're going to have to be consistently very good for the last half of the schedule. And if they do that, then there is a world where they can win all 4 games. We'll see if they can do it. So with that, we'll get out of here. Hope everybody has a nice bye week. Hope everyone has nice bye week plans.
LSU will not lose this week, so it's going to be a
Nope.
great week for
There
everyone.
you go. Subscribe to the Bengal Tiger on 3. Plenty of recruiting stuff, plenty of
Only a
football
dollar.
stuff. Only $1 for a week, and then you get half off the rest of the year. I mean, it's a great deal. And then, I have a lot of basketball recruiting stuff this week as
Yeah,
well.
I have a lot of football recruiting stuff this week with the bye week and checking in on guys. Everybody's asking, hey, LSU's top 5 class, top 3 class, are they all sticking?
Yep.
Where do things stand? We'll have the latest on all of that. It'll be a busy week, trust me.
Yep. So subscribe to the Bengal Tiger on 3. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not already. We greatly appreciate all the support. If you're listening on the audio side, leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you are listening. And we will be back with a mailbag pod later this week and a recruiting pod. So check all that out, and we will talk to y'all later.